Good afternoon, everyone. Another happy Tuesday. Thank you for joining us. We have Chris Montgomery here. This is our third part of the three-part series. So today we will be asking you to complete an evaluation. And I beg of you to complete the evaluation. It is so important for us. It's how we get our data. We want to know what's important to you, what worked for you, what didn't work. If you felt that this was prepared, this helps us as a bouncing off point to prepare for future webinars and to provide trainings that all of you need and would like to see. So the evaluation is very important to us. It really shouldn't take you more than 5 minutes. We ask, just maybe a few questions, but it really does help us. Again, I'm Donna Riccobono. I'm project director of Connections Beyond Sight and Sound, which is the Maryland and DC project. And we are hosting this lovely three-part series with Chris Montgomery. And Jen Willis is here. She's our project coordinator. We have Becky Hummer, our education specialist, and Jenny Stepanek, who's our other educational specialist. If at any time during the webinar, if you have any questions or concerns, please feel free to reach out to us and we will answer your questions. We will also be having our usual chat in the chat box. So we will, it's been very lively, our chat box. So thank you for that. Thank you for participating. We will post some questions and we could start off if Chris would like to just have everybody who's here. And it's always fun to learn who's the furthest from us. We were talking earlier about how do people from the UK and Egypt and Australia, how are they learning about our webinars? So if you have any insight into how you learned about this webinar today, we would just love to hear about it. So I don't want to take up too much time. This is our last session with Chris Montgomery. Again, we would love your feedback on the evaluation form. We will put it in the chat box at the end, and also we will send it by email. All right, Chris Montgomery.
All right, Donna Riccobono, thank you.
You're very welcome, my friend.
Well, it's good to see so many names. I was trying to watch all the list populate there of everybody who was tuning in. It's true. It's very curious. We've had people from Egypt and all over Europe, Australia. I know I'm forgetting some places, but it's really cool. I think it's awesome that we've got such an international crowd tuning in. So I'm going to go ahead and get kind of rolling through this PowerPoint. As Donna was saying, this is the third one in our series of 3. So this will be our final episode, so to speak. Today we're going to talk about calendar systems. And when I say calendar systems, I think that's kind of how the field of deafblind education is used to referring to this thing that is not just a calendar, but also literacy. Also, I would hope could be used for storytelling, telling a person's past. It's a written document. It can be. Just all of these things, the static form of communication that goes along with our dynamic communication. So to me, a calendar system is not only about time, but it's about words on a page. And you probably hear me talking about that as we go along, referring to it as words on a page. So again, like Donna was saying, my name is Chris Montgomery. And for anybody who is just tuning in new today, hello, I'm coming to you from my palatial office space in sunny, wonderful Austin, Texas. Just a little background, I always kind of go through this in case there are new people tuning in, but Donna told me we had like maybe again over 200 people today, so welcome. A little bit of background though. I just feel weird just launching into this without some sort of little more introduction for those who don't know me. But I started a long time ago as a teaching assistant at the Texas School for the Blind here in Austin, then became a classroom teacher, a teacher of the visually impaired, eventually went on to work for our Texas Deafblind project as a deafblind education consultant and did that for a number of years, traveling Texas, seeing kids and meeting families, working on national and international projects. Um, and then eventually, excuse me, transitioned to Perkins School for the Blind, where I was deafblind director of deafblind programs there. And now I'm back in Austin. So there you go. Enough about me. If people want to populate the chat, I'd love to hear from you all and kind of see where you all are from, introduce yourselves and that sort of thing. Trying to get my screen situated here. Patty. Hi, Patty. Amy. Seeing some old friends on here. That's awesome. Oh my gosh. Montana, Houston. Wonder if I know Eugene. People from all over again. That's super cool. Welcome. I hope you're warm wherever you're at. Not snowed in or something. Um, the prior couple of discussions that we had, we were talking a whole lot about interaction and communication and language, and then functional routines, how those things kind of fit together. We briefly discussed ideas around cognition, embodied cognitive theory, and how those things might relate to a kiddo who's deafblind and their need for more experiential, functional learning approach in order to build that language and those concepts. So today, as we talk about this calendar thing, I'm using these quotes, calendars. Um, I hope to be able to give you some tools and ideas and resources again, so that as you're trying to build a calendar system for your classroom or at home, you'll have some stuff to use. Going to give you some references. But we're still gonna, as always, whenever I talk about this stuff, we'll also still be talking about communication and language and interaction, because for me, that's the most important thing. That's it. That's everything almost. It all kind of comes out of that. So, as we organize our lessons, our activities into these functional routines, this thing that has a beginning, a middle, and an end, which is the routine, that's when we start to plug that into our calendar system. It kind of, here's what we're doing today, and here's how we're going to talk about it. So again, it's I think, a very important way to develop literacy using this calendar system. Um, I'm going to be showing a lot of videos. I always show videos. I like to show videos. So nearly everything that I'm showing today is also available on the Texas Deafblind Project website. So if you go to Texas Deafblind website, there will be some kind of sub websites in there. So a lot of it is on the interaction website, and then there's an instructional strategies sort of sub website in there too, that most all of the videos and a lot of the stuff that I'm talking about today and have been talking about will be there. Not all of it, but some of it. Huh. Can rewatch the videos for sure. Okay, so poll question to you all. Poll, I'm supposed to yell poll really loudly. Um, Who's tuning in for the first time this week? Have you been here the whole time, or is this your first time tuning in? And I'm still looking at the chat. So we've got TVIs, we've got people from Deafblind projects. Um, okay, so it looks like we've got just a couple people tuning in for the first time. So welcome, welcome, welcome. For those of you who have had to hear my first couple introductory slides 3 times now, I apologize for that, but thank you for for bearing with us as we go through this and get the new people acclimated, so to speak. Okay, little bit more of a repeat, but a disclaimer here that I always like to give, that my experience is primarily working with students who are deafblind, also visually impaired, multiply impaired, but I will be coming from that experience and talking from that experiential place. So if you're not working with a student who is deafblind, or if you're family of a student who is not deafblind and you have a question, or even any question, please don't hesitate to put it in chat. You can unmute, and I really welcome the discourse online. It's a little difficult sometimes on Zoom. Please feel free to do that. In the meantime, though, if you would please mute your microphone so that we're not hearing background noise. But if you want to unmute, have at it, okay? You're not interrupting. That's good. And any other questions, please put those in chat. Okay, poll. We've got another poll, two polls right off the bat. So how often do you use a calendar in your daily life? And is it not that often, like maybe once a week? Do you use it daily? Do you use it multiple times a week or a day, I mean? So most everybody, well, no, most everybody's at least daily, and most of us are many times a day. And I think with the advent of the phone that's sort of always in our pocket and always with us, I know it's made me look at my calendar more often. I used to be a total pen and paper, calendar on the wall type of guy, but now we've got this little thing and it gives you reminders and everything. So I know that myself, like I'll look at my calendar at the end of the day, like what's happening tomorrow, so I can anticipate, I can prepare. It just sort of helps me helps me be a little calmer, maybe is a way to put it. I'm not sure. And then I usually check it in the morning too, like what's my schedule for today? Um, the point is that we all, I would say, use a calendar, whether it's pen and paper, whether it's electronic on your phone or computer. It's something that we all use to keep track of what's coming up, um, some sort of a physical item that we use. Um, I think that most of the ways we think about using calendars is probably in the context of time. So mainly keeping track of what's coming up, like what are my appointments, what are my future events, so to speak, important meetings or something like that. And then, further out, like maybe important dates of like birthdays and anniversaries or things like that. We don't want to forget, right? And I think it's comforting to be able to be reassured, to be able to anticipate those things too. Um, but we also, I think, I'm going to stretch a little bit here, maybe this concept of calendar, but we also use them for keeping lists, like to-do lists. It's as a way to stay organized. I could even stretch a little further maybe and say that like a recipe is a type of calendar. It's a process, it's a this, then this, then this, and it's a way of writing down and keeping a record of how we bake a cake or something. Um, Keep running with this idea. Calendars for marking time, we might say another way we use calendars is for memory. So we've got this sort of memory bank of our life story. And if we mark that history in a sequence of hours, of days, of years, of seasons, etc., um, we also are going to mark events by the occasion. We're going to give them a name to categorize them. Um, we kind of, at least for me, I guess I kind of think of it, I've got this sort of Rolodex, and I've got when things happened, their relation to other things that may have happened, and I've got a way of naming them and categorizing them so that I can form concepts around things. This is a birthday. This was an anniversary. Oh, this was the year of the ice storm in Austin, and this happened, sorts of things like that. So again, it's a way of kind of reflecting too and organizing these past events so that we don't get lost in this kind of, space time thing. Um, if we didn't have a way to record those past events, the history, our sense of self. Again, I keep talking about this sense of self. Where am I in the world? Where am I in time and space? Without these calendars and this written history, that sense of self might be seriously challenged. Um, so this little picture here is these are some of my kids in my classroom a long time ago. Um, and I know for these guys, a calendar was really important. Um, just like us, our kids need a workable timepiece. They need that physical thing or that tool that they can use to mark time. Um, Something that they can refer to as needed. Maybe it's multiple times a day, maybe it's once a day. It all depends on the person. Um, our kids need a calendar for that language and vocabulary. So, what language are we attaching to time concepts? Things like now, later. That's a tough one, right? What's later? Today or yesterday or tomorrow, next week, the future, the past, all these things. Um, so again, like back to a concept like later, how do we teach that without external support to kind of show how time will pass? Because later by itself or wait, for instance, those are really abstract without something to tell us this is going to happen now, and then that's going to happen, and then, what we're anticipating. Then that's when that happens. I hope that makes sense. Does anybody have students who have trouble waiting, for instance? Like what, just what does that mean? You say later or wait. It's a hard thing to do, right? Um, so again, we need a way to be able to put those cards in our kids' Rolodex for uh, also remembering, being able to remember and recall past events, storytelling. So this idea of chunking time, um, calendar will provide for us the ability to process and talk about things in a more linear fashion. Um, whether time is linear or not, I guess is another conversation, but I think that the world tends to work is that we do relate this time concept as sort of a linear process. The future is out there and the past is behind us. I'm even watching our interpreters, the sign language kind of reflects that. Um, so we've got to have this tool that will help us understand that concept. Um, we'll talk about this concept, the first concept to learn is kind of now. And that's where an anticipation calendar would come in. So we'll talk about an anticipation calendar in a moment. But the very first thing that we're going to need to do is to have something that will help support that concept of now. Um, and even though I was just saying it's good to start with now, I'm going to kind of take a left turn here. And I want to take a moment to expand on this idea of calendars and their relation to memory and the idea of storytelling, and why that's so important for us to consider with our students. So there are two main strategies that we use for working memory, as far as time is concerned. So we need working memory strategies to record and to process and recall memories. And so the first one is called rehearsal strategy and involves repetition, the repeating of sounds or words or movement in a systematic way. So I'm thinking like an actor learning a new scene. Or in the case of our students, it might be that repeatable routine like grooming. This happens and then this happens and then this. You can remember last week's episodes with the grooming routines in them. The other strategy is called autobiographical memory strategy, and this involves a more internal process of organizing and conceptualizing our life's individual experiences into that larger whole that becomes our life story, so to speak. Again, last winter this happened, birthday last year, or anniversary, or baby was born, or something like that. So part of this organizing and conceptualizing of our past events includes our need to share our story with others. If you can't sort of reflect and process, reminisce, so to speak, on these past experiences, what happens there? I'm not really sure. Did it ever really happen? Did I imagine this? That is sort of how we process the past. We do that with others, whether it's one-on-one or large groups. But we used to do this with photo albums, don't know if anybody else had the family kind of get-togethers where the photo album would eventually come out and you'd start, oh yeah, you'd be looking at all these past events with the photo album and telling those life stories. Um, and flash forward to now, I wonder how many of you all have experienced, you go out to dinner with friends and pretty soon people are breaking out their phones and showing pictures to each other. Again, and it's a way to reminisce, so to speak, and process things that have happened and tell that story. And so our kids have to have that too. It's a human thing to share our life stories with other people's. It provides us with that sense of self, right? It places a context for our lives and our experiences. Um, and I wish I could see y'all's face. Is there any questions about any of this or anything anybody would want to interject here while I take a sip of coffee? Bridget says, notice and reinforce communication. Last week's simple language to explain to others. Thank you. Yes. That noticing is first step, right? Okay, I'm not seeing many comments. Okay, this is just a fun little video. Somebody, extra credit if you can tell me what show this is from.
Whoa, talk about a trip down memory lane. Oh, yes. Look at us in St. Thomas.
That was right before you whisked me away on that little treasure hunt, remember? Mm-hmm. And then you asked me to marry me. Tell me why you want to marry me.
It's the answer office.
I want to hear the words, Rich.
I love you, Doctor.
I want to hear that again.
I love.
You want me?
And I want you.
And I'm the most important woman in your life?
You are the most important woman in my life.
No, the only woman.
The only woman.
You want my answer?
What's yours?
My answer is yes, Fred. I want so much to marry you.
Thank God you said yes.
Like I would have had anything else. Despite the hard time I gave you.
Oh my God, I bet nobody thought they'd be tuning into a little daytime TV drama today, did you? Um, Deb and Rebecca, Winner Winner Chicken Dinner, the bold and the beautiful. Oh my God. I have to ask that every time I play that video, just so you know, because I always forget what this is. Did somebody have a question? You guys, your door prize is in the mail. Excellent job. But in the video, you see this pretty weird little clip. I hope that was fun to some of y'all. Of again, kind of reminiscing and um, processing together that memory from the past, right? And it's just something that I think all humans need to do, and hopefully all of us get the chance to do it. Hopefully our kids get the chance to do it too. So um, let's talk a little bit about tactile memory. And so how does a child who is deafblind, especially a child who's genitally deafblind, experience and then recall events? How do we share these experiences and co-construct that story using mutually understood language? And so for most of us, vision and hearing are our dominant senses, right? So they're the basis for how we take in and how we process our life's experiences. And as we've discussed previously, our formal languages are visually based. That's what they emanate from. When we reflect, though, on our memories or process an event from earlier in the day, um, for me, given that language is visually based, and I don't have any scientific proof for this correlation, but I do know that my memories are usually visually and auditorily based too. So I'll have like this movie of the event, my memory. It's very visual, very auditory. I remember how things looked. I remember what was said. And we carry these memories, these little clips around with us in our brains, right? And we replay them like short little movie scenes. Um, I see things that happened and I hear what was said or the music that was playing. And as powerful as these scenes can be, it takes a lot more thought for me to recall the tactile information or the tactile sensations that were part of the memory. Um, and as an example, um, my wife and I a few months ago had our anniversary. It was a big anniversary. It was a milestone one. And I can even today still picture the inside of the restaurant we were in. I can remember what my wife was wearing. She looked very beautiful. Um, but I can't remember how I was positioned at the table, what the chair felt like, what the tablecloth felt like. Um, I don't remember the smell of the food, even though olfactory senses can be very powerful too. Um, I can't even remember what we ate, but these memories, for me anyway, I'm going to speak for myself, but my tactile memories are much harder for me to recall. Um, much more energy needs to be put into like, what is my tactile experience right now versus my visual experience. And so I would argue that we don't keep records of our tactile memories like we do with our visual and auditory memories. Um, and why don't we typically use tactile information again as a tool for recording our life story? I'm going to say, I really wonder if it's because we don't use a tactually based language. And I wonder if our language is not as advanced in its description of the tactile experience as it is for the visual or auditory experience. And so what does this mean for the individual whose language is tactile? The person whose experience of the world is a tactile bodily based experience. The information that they get from their hands and their feet and their body. So I'm going to play you another video, and this is a video of a student named Jarvis. And this video is getting a little old at this point, admittedly. Jarvis was in his early teens here. And Jarvis is going to the drum store with his teacher, Matt. You guys might remember Matt from last week. Jarvis has a moderate hearing loss with his hearing aids in. He has no light perception. Things to look for with this. How is Jarvis learning language in this video that I'm going to show you? Pay attention to the concepts that he's learning. And we talked so much last week about embodied cognition and that embodied experience. Think about his tactile bodily understanding of this experience as he goes through it. And then how are calendars, we're talking about calendars, how are calendars being used in this video to support literacy and support the dynamic tactile bodily language that's being used? Other things that we'll talk about in a moment. How does the calendar support that autobiographical memory strategy? How's the calendar being used so that Jarvis can tell his story to another person? And so you will see in the video Jarvis starting his day, previewing his day. It's like getting up in the morning and looking, what do we have to do today, you know, on our calendar? Where are our appointments? And he'll be doing this with his intervener. And he's got a pretty incredible advanced calendar system. He's using tactile symbols. And then you will see cut to, he's going into the drum store with his teacher, Matt. And then the last part of the clip, you'll see him with his speech teacher, Tish, and they'll be talking about the past. So it's a couple days later.
Tuesday.
Yes.
That's a monthly calendar Jarvis is using there.
It's Tuesday. Drum store. Restaurant.
I'm going to pause it just for a moment here and tell you what's happening. So imagine that's a giant wall calendar on that office divider. That's an office divider, that sort of thing, that wall. And on the top, you see tactile symbols for each day of the week, and then like 4 weeks. The weeks that are past have a strip over them. It's like a strip of foam material. And that shows that those are in the past. You can still access them because you need a way to show that those are in the past. These weeks are still to come in the future. But the things that are in the past just don't disappear off the end of the world, right? You still need to be able to, oh, like, hey, last Wednesday we did this crazy thing, right? If Jarvis wants to go back in there and talk about it, that still needs to be there. So if you've got any questions, though, put them in the chat or at the end of the video, just unmute.
Music. Let's put that one right here. Band.
Pausing again, these are expansion strips. So you, instead of just a tactile symbol that says drum store, for instance, you can see that they've started to expand to go where, with who, and do what. So your sentence building. and you're expanding that literacy using experiential language and tactile symbols.
Explore. Drum store. With map.
That's his daily calendar.
Drum store. Yes. With map. And then let's see. Music with Pascal. Cook hot cereal. Waffles. At the dorm. One more. Choice time. Let's get that one. Yes. It's finished. Yes. 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 Band exploring. Yes. Drum store. With map. Yes.
Okay, this is later that day at the drum store.
Give you a massive around here.
Say hi. What's his name again? Tracy. Tracy. I wonder if you have a instrumental. Tracy. And wave under his hands. This is Deafblind. You can hear a little bit, but you really just touch this floor stuff.
No, she can walk up in here.
Joe, you're scared. It's okay. It's okay.
Wow, this is
That will help. Boom, 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 boom. Jarvis, turn. It's holding on pretty tight. Boom, boom, walk. Explore different drums. Oh.
Sing it over there. Yeah, go,
All right, Jarvis.
go. Go. Oh, my.
Tuesday. What's that? Van, yeah. Matt, You walked and got the van with Matt. You turn the page. Turn the page. Oh, excuse me, Garth. What? Explore. Yeah, explore. What's that? What? The drum store. Drum store. What? What? Ooh, the Mexican restaurant. What? What? Cooking. Oh, hey. That is that cheese tortilla. The drum store is finished. Jarvis explored the drums. We had this one. And the big drum. Boom 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 boom.
Hi.
Okay, so this is a couple days later, and this is Tish, Jarvis's speech language teacher.
Tuesday. Oh, you went exploring? Exploring last Tuesday? Matt, and then turn the page. Oh, Jarvis. Exploring the drum store. Wow. Store. Yeah, they can turn the page. I like to see the view. Boom 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 boom. Yeah. Boom 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 boom.
So I'm going to pause again because I think this is a really important moment where you can see sort of the pairing of the vocal information, the auditory information, the boom, 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 and how explicit that is to that experience of labeling the drum, and how explicit that is to that movement, and how when Tish just said that, when all Jarvis got was the auditory, he immediately started to make the hand move it to pair it. And how that language together, that auditory, that bodily, was meaningful to Jarvis. But it wouldn't have been meaningful without the actual experience of going to the drum store and beating on that big drum.
Oh, that was fun. Large drums.
No.
Yeah.
Just his mouth. He uses his hand.
Oh, sorry than that. Oh, you're happy. That we're exploring the drum store.
This is too good. Oh my God, I'm sorry, I can't keep a straight face. Some of
What's the deal? Look at it. Yeah. She certainly knows that one has something to say.
Oh. Bum, 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 bum. Bum, 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 boom, 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 boom.
As long as he's gonna be on there. Get off. Yeah, but it's not.
Less than.
Whoa.
Choose.
I just messed up the video, but that was about the end of it. I think you could see how joyous Jarvis was to be able to share his experience and tell his story, to reminisce on this drum store event that happened. I hope you all saw too, like when Jarvis got scared, he jumped, and Matt acknowledged that and he labeled it. He said, "You're scared. I'm here. It's okay." But he put that label, he named that emotion. And to think about how hard it, excuse me, how hard it is to teach emotions in isolation, is core vocabulary words or something like that doesn't make sense, right? It's when you experience that emotion, that's when you can put the label on it, and that's when it's meaningful. This release, I don't know, I felt like I saw Jarvis. I was there at the moment. That's me behind the camera, but I just saw this release from Jarvis, like relief of being able to tell Tish about this pretty emotionally charged exploring activity that they did. And that's what this whole thing was. It wasn't to go learn about drums or anything like that. They did pick something that they knew Jarvis liked. He liked to drum, but he had never been to that drum store. So it was really about the concept of exploring, and that's what this field trip was. So how do you teach exploring without going to do it? Because, sometimes exploration can be a little nerve-wracking. Things are generally new to you when you explore. It's kind of what that's about, right? So that whole concept was being taught here. And I'm reading Donna's comment. How do you think it made Jarvis feel to be able to reflect? Anybody have any thoughts about this they want to share? 12033 says, from the social communication perspective, turn taking was absolutely remarkable. Yes, it was. The excitement and the joy. Oh, Addie, okay. It's good to see you again. I don't know how to pronounce your name and I'm getting it wrong. I'm sure. I'm sorry, but thank you for your comments. Anybody else? What about how they were using calendars in this? Jarvis is very advanced in his use of calendars and his language. He had actually come to the Texas School for the Blind when he was very young. He was about 6 years old. So at this point, he's had lots of experience using calendars. He is pretty high level dude with this stuff. Notice how the tactile symbols, how the calendar system, how the words on the page were helping to support the dynamic language too, so they could keep referring back to, they just made that big drum symbol, tactile symbol. It wasn't like something that they had before, because it was through the act of doing it, it was putting that label on it, both dynamically and statically. Looks like a complex calendar. How did they start using calendars? Well, Jarvis, I actually know this because I knew Jarvis. I had him in my class when he was a lot younger. And he started with an anticipation calendar. So, like most of us, he started with the concept of what's happening right now. And we'll talk more about anticipation calendars in a moment. And then he just was able to expand as he got more exposure and learned more language and more concepts. He was able to expand that concept of time further into the future and then further into the past. And just as a general statement, I think that we tend to focus more on the future with our students and what's coming up. And maybe we're not spending as much time reminiscing and talking about what did happen and reflecting on the experience, because both are really powerful things. And Meredith says we didn't see a self-directed exploration. Did he get to touch things and see the layout of the store? Yeah, he did. That's a good point. It doesn't really show that in the video, but as things, as they would kind of make their way around the store, and it was a pretty crowded store in there too, with lots of different stuff. But if Jarvis touched something that he was interested in, they went for it. And I think that's honestly how they came to that big drum. You just didn't see the lead in. So that's a really good question, though. Ophelia says, what types of calendars do you use for younger kids to become? We'll get to that. That's a great question, Ophelia. So with that in mind, let's segue a little bit. I'm gonna keep talking about this for just a moment though. So yeah, let me think. No, I'm gonna just kind of keep going here. But I did want to touch on this. So we talked last week about bodily emotional traces. And just as a refresh, a bodily emotional trace or a BET are emotional memories that are imprinted in our bodies. So BETs usually occur during this high intensity reciprocal interaction where there's lots of involvement, shared involvement in the experience, and there's emotional content. So, like you saw with Jarvis, there was lots of emotional content in this exploration of the drum store, right? He was scared. I don't know if you could tell this by watching the video, but Matt even commented he's hanging on really tight. Um, and then when when he was retelling the experience or reminiscing about their experience with Tish, I hope you could notice too how there was a lot of emotional tension, even though the emotion was more release and happy versus anxious, and I'm not so sure about this, scared maybe. There was still that tension that you could see in their communication, that emotion. Um, so I wonder, as we noticed those big movements that Matt was doing, whether it was the big drum or whether it was the xylophone thing, um, how Matt attached that language and physically acted those things out using the tactile bodily mode, but then also the auditory mode. Um, and then going back to that embodied cognitive moment, how that must have, how that experience was for Jarvis. And then the bodily emotional, the trace that came out. I just want to make sure you all are seeing this, that the trace was what came out then as they were reminiscing about it, he and Tish, and he started those movements, or he would do this about the big drum, and he would take Tish's hands. They were touching then. But at one point they weren't touching, and he started to do a thing like this. That was a bet. That was a bodily emotional trace. But all of those things sort of coalesced around that experience. So the tactile bodily experience, the auditory input, and then the emotion left a trace, imprint. And I hope that makes sense. I wish I could read the room. If you guys have questions, let it rip. I'm reading. Colette says there was lots of hand to hand, hand under hand for exploration and directing. Where are they using tact? Yeah. So they were using tactile sign too. You notice it was maybe not always like a strict ASL. Um, but yes, name signs. Um, they were also sort of making things up, like I think drum store was like kind of drum shopping, things like that. But yes, when they were describing the restaurant, they were going to get enchiladas, and Matt was signing enchiladas and stuff like that. So hopefully that answers your question. Um, I know we're gonna talk about calendars, I promise. And hopefully you see that we are, but I want to also give you another, what I think is very important idea to consider. Um, so it's this idea of imperative versus declarative statements. So Dr. Paul Hart was the first person who kind of introduced this thinking to me. And it really kind of, really got me. It really grabbed me. I think it's a brilliant thing to consider as we're working with our kids, especially as we're thinking of these bodily emotional traces and this tactile bodily sign experiences and stuff like this. So declarative communication is the kind of communication where someone's making a comment. They're expressing an emotion. Maybe they're talking about what happened yesterday or something that might happen tomorrow. It's moving away from the here and now. Conversely, imperative communication is more about imparting knowledge or giving a command, making a request. Paul would say, this cup of Earl Grey, this is, give me some more. I'm requesting more of this or something. And I think for me, I know when I was a teacher in the classroom, that was sort of my default, this imperative. A student's signing, whether it's ASL or a tactile bodily movement, I tended to default to the imperative. They're requesting something. And so if we presume that everything is imperative, that somebody's making a request or asking for something in the here and now, by the time we've kind of acknowledged that request and have, started to try to fulfill that request, oh, you want more coffee or, whatever it might be, then we kind of shut down any possibility of talking about it. So we've already acted on that, interpreted it as that request. And so if for instance, we reflect on the Jarvis video, you see many examples of Matt and Tish assuming the declarative with Jarvis. So that whole conversation, you'll notice how Jarvis starts talking about the big drum or the xylophone, and Tish doesn't immediately take that as a request for, oh, more xylophone, more cowbell or whatever. Instead, she says, oh, that xylophone, it was fun and it made you happy. So it just adds so much more richness, the possibility for so much more richness to the conversation if you kind of default to the declarative. And if it is a request for something, if it's like, no, I'm not telling you that was fun, I'm telling you I want some, like it's a request. I mean, I pretty positive that will come through, that I am actually requesting that. So it's just I think a thing to keep in mind for us. Paul says it has a good story about it, and I'm going to play this quick video here and let Paul, in fact, kind of tell this story.
I think it goes back to what we were discussing before, which was responding to everything as if it has a communication potential, and then if a gesture or a movement that grows out of an activity, and that could be, I don't know, just making a cup of coffee, and there are movements and gestures that you'll have to do to make a cup of coffee.
And any of those gestures could then come back from the child as a way of talking about the coffee making. And I suppose it's our job really to try and spot where those gestures are, and to acknowledge that is a really, really super way of asking for a cup of coffee. But to think of it in a tactile manner and not necessarily in a visual manner. There's a young woman who I know in Scotland, and there were she went to the cafe most Wednesdays, and myself and another colleague took her to this cafe, and we had hours and hours of video footage of different trips to the cafe, because we were trying to watch language grow from her and how it happened. But there was an observation that one staff member said, I don't know what she means when she places her hand like this in my hand. So she'll look for my hand and she puts her hand down with that movement. And we don't really know what it means. So we can then trawl back through hours and hours of video, going back weeks and weeks and weeks, and we can begin to understand a bit more about what this gesture means. And when you see maybe months before that, when she's had a cup of tea and it's placed on a table, then because she is completely deaf, blind, then she will place her hand at the perimeter of the table and she sweeps her hand in till she bumps into the cup, and then she takes the cup and drinks. So part of our thinking might be, well, I wonder in a tactile capacity if that means something to do with drink. And the reason it was confusing for the staff team is because she had a sign for drink already, which would be a standard tactile version of the British Sign Language sign for drink. And the staff are saying, if she has that sign for drink, then why don't we just use that one and not, are we sure this means drink? So again, you can watch hours and hours of footage, and we can begin to see that there's a pattern that emerges. If there's no drink there on the table, it's the first drink she's had in the cafe, she will give us a sign, drink, or a tactile version of that. If she's finished that cup of coffee and she's after another cup of coffee, then that's when this sign was given. So it's kind of like she had two different ways. There was a sign for asking for coffee, and there was a sign for asking for another coffee. But this one is very tactile because it's exactly the movement she had to do to pick up the coffee.
So I hope that kind of makes sense to everyone. Totally agree. Thank you. Colette says, thank you. It's so difficult to coach parents and providers toward, yes, declarative language. Yeah, it is. It's kind of easier, I think maybe faster sometimes to just kind of defer to this request, defer to the present, rather than that explorative approach of, I wonder what this comment might be. So again, I'm diverging a little bit, but I think all this stuff is important as we are thinking of language, conversation, interaction. Laura says, in the Jarvis video, there was a great planning on the part of Matt, the educator, to have every drum beat. Yeah, that's a really good point, Laura. Thank you. Thank you very much for bringing that up. I usually mention that, but the teamwork that went into that. So obviously, in the interim 2 days, Matt and Tish really had to do some work together, right? Like, what is the language going to be that we're associating to this experience? Not just the words that we're saying, but the movement, the tactile symbols, the calendar, the language that the words we're putting on the page. What are those? And making sure that those are the same. And I can guarantee you that all of the other staff worked in conjunction with them too. So when we're talking about exploring, going to the drum store, whatever it might be, that they're using that same language of boom, 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 boom kind of stuff. Yeah, that's a really great point. So teaming's a big deal there. Okay, let's move along. So this is a story of a student's experience stories. So as we're talking about, you know, that reminiscing and those photo album kind of things, this teacher had like a library that the student in her classroom could go over to if they wanted to, hey, I want to talk about the water park, or I want to talk about my trip to McDonald's. The student could always go and access that experience story, and it would be in the medium that they needed, whether it was pictures, tactile symbols, what have you, Braille. And an experience story, I'm just operating on the idea that everybody knows what that is, but it's really as you go out and you have this experience, you're gathering objects, or you're taking pictures together if your student is visual, and then you're coming back and you're assembling this in a sort of calendar from start to finish of the event that documents that experience. And it's like a photo album. It's like the two people in the soap opera that you saw earlier talking about, oh my God, when you proposed to me kind of thing. I've seen them used for kids who maybe have anxiety about going to visit the doctor or something like that. Maybe making an experience story of that event, so that as that's coming up, you can kind of talk about it and preview it. And and as we all know, stressful events, if we can talk about it with another person at a time, sometimes that helps the anxiety and things like that. So it's another way you can use experience stories. Um, yeah, there's a guy named Joe Gibson. I would encourage you all to kind of look him up. You can Google him and find some stuff, but he does lots of stuff with deafblind kids outdoors. And so he uses a big long rope as an experience calendar, way to tell the story, and he'll attach artifacts that they find in these outdoor experiences along the rope, which I think is just a brilliant way to have an experience story too. Who says it has to be in a book or something, right? So talking about time concepts. So typical learners attend and understand events in their lives at a very young age, right? So they easily learn to anticipate the next step, the future, and we can figure out pretty easily when things are wrapping up. This information is available to us from a distance passively. We don't have to do much work. However, if you're not able to access that visual or auditory information, it's hard to now know how long something might last. Like this thing that we're doing, does it ever end? How do you know? Um, it's hard to anticipate when something's about to start. And it might be hard to anticipate when the next thing's going to happen after this too, right? So my analogy is we're waiting in line at the grocery store. And as we stand there, with our vision, we can easily tell, like, okay, there's three people in front of me or whatever. And we can form a concept of, okay, looks like people are moving through the line pretty quickly. So we can kind of judge how long that wait time's going to be. But who's ever had the experience maybe of being in a traffic jam that goes up over a hill or around a bend and you can't see the end of it? So you don't really know how long you might be sitting there in that event, right? And how much harder that is. So again, if you put that into the context of our kids who may not be able to visually or auditorily access the end of that line, and you're just saying wait or later or something like that, well, that's we need to be able to provide them more information. And how do we do that? So with all that in mind, let's talk about calendar design and what we need to start thinking about in order to do that. So some things that I immediately start to think about is what sensory accommodations do I need to put into place as I'm designing this calendar? Is my student a visual learner? Are they auditory or tactile? You would look at the students' accommodations if you have those in your IEP documentation where you're at. As we start to think about what to do to build the calendar, the passage of time, where is our student at with being able to understand that concept? Are they a now student, or are they able to stretch time further out into the future or further behind them? And I think of this again, like almost like a line that I'm standing on. And I'll try to do that so my camera can pick it up. But if I'm in the now right here on the line and I'm going out into the future, boom, present, and into the past, how far is the person that I'm working with able to understand the concepts of future and past versus the right now close to the body thing? Again, the routines, we've got to have activities that we're doing that are structured, that have names so that we can include those into that future and past, right? So we've got to have our routines in place. And then is it in the IEP? I think it's really important to always have calendar in the routine. Somehow, some way, it's their form of literacy. I would go so far as to state how many times they will do this per day. They'll check their calendar. Can they follow a left to right sequence? All these kinds of things can be IEP objectives, but get the calendar in the IEP. So it becomes a legally kind of binding document, right? Incidentally, we've got some resources that'll go out, but this book, it's called Calendars for Students with Multiple Impairments, including Deafblindness. It's by my good friend, Robbie Bleha. And, this book's been around for a while, but it's still, to me, it's what I grew up in. So I'm probably, swayed by that. But I think this is a really good starting place. You can get that at the TSBVI curriculum department online. You can order that. I think it's really important to designate a calendar area in the classroom or at home. And the calendar's always there whenever we want to refer to it, talk about it, what's going to happen next, what's in the future for today or this evening at home, and then also what's in the past, to be able to come back to that. And that's all that happens there. That calendar is not also where you bake brownies or something like that. It's calendar only. And I know this can be a challenge because space might be tight in a classroom, but as much as you can, have a place where it's designated calendar area. So we're thinking about the physicality of the calendar. Size matters. So you don't want a calendar, keep your calendar at wingspan. So can my student, if they hold out their arms as far as they can, I'm going off screen here, I realize, can they reach from one end of the calendar to the other without having to physically move? So you want to be able to reach from one end of that thing to another if it's a strip, right? And speaking of if it's a strip, is it a vertical strip on a table that goes left to right? The other format would be top to bottom. And that's just because that's in our society, that's the way, we tend to go left to right or top to bottom. Maybe a book is better. That's okay. If a book's a better format, go with a book. I've always tried to have, like, from an O&M, get your O&M in there, to your orientation and mobility specialist in there to help you design that area too. Just by the way, it's a team effort. OTs, PTs can be very helpful, but my O&M people always taught me, like, you need some sort of a tactile marker on the floor too. So an area rug can be a nice thing to sort of delineate your calendar area. You could see in some of the classrooms shots that we'll see in a minute, like I always would hit people up for like, hey, are there any of those old office divider things around? Could I have one of those? And that can make a nice sort of a tactile, very strong tactile marker too for the calendar area. Um, I just think that no two calendars are the same. So it really, you have to take in students' accommodations, how they access their environment, how they chunk time. Can they chunk time way far out? All that kind of stuff. You have to be thinking about all these things. So no two are the same. They fit the person. So we talked about experience stories. There are routine or sequencing calendars, and I think of this as that sort of task analysis within the activity. Last week you saw all the grooming routines. So if you've got a daily calendar that says, okay, we're going to go groom, and maybe that's a toothbrush symbol or something, you get to the grooming area where the sink or wherever you do that, and then you break that larger chunk of time into smaller steps. So you're almost a task analysis. And so for that, you would have a sequencing calendar, and you'd have each step labeled, kind of like a recipe again, left to right, if that's how the student accesses. But it's a way to add more conversation, more literacy, more language to that, as well as kind of break that procedural memory up for a person. Other kind of calendar is a choice calendar. So a choice calendar can do many things. For one, it can teach the concept of choice making. Do you want this or do you want this? Make a choice, you pick. But then it can also be choice making on a grander scale too. Like if you go to a restaurant, a menu is kind of a choice calendar too, but it's many choices. So, and then the timepiece calendar is really our like daily schedule kind of calendar. All these are physical tools, physical calendars. Okay, I need to take a drink. So, this is a picture of that sequencing calendar that I mentioned. So, as you can see here, this is a 3-slot calendar, a sequence of 3 things. And I am not sure what these objects represent, to be honest with you. I need a better picture, but then you can see behind it is a finished basket. So this student's going to come over here and I don't know, they're making eggs or something, but this egg making activity, I'm just going to say that's probably not what this is broken into those 3 steps. And when one step's finished, you do it, you take it, you finish it in the finished box, and then you move to the next thing. So again, like we talked about last week, each of these steps has a name or a label. The steps are repeatable and consistent. And we're breaking that larger chunk of time that is egg making into smaller steps. So we're chunking time. We're taking that large chunk, breaking it into smaller chunks. Any thoughts or questions on that? I feel like I'm talking really fast now. Choice calendar, again, this is a picture of a choice calendar. So you can see on here, hopefully you can see that there's like an orange bear, and then there's an egg beater that's slightly off screen. But so do you want to play with the bear, or do you want to beat some eggs? You pick. Oftentimes I would say to have, if the student's a tactile learner, the student may be very visual, so that's okay. But sometimes it's really nice to have like a tactile strip or a visual divider that goes down the middle of that tray. And that tray is just an APH tray that you can order from APH. But again, remember that everybody needs to be able to make choices in their lives. So, okay. So we're getting to this daily timepiece thing, and I'm going to break this down into some different parts as well. So anticipation calendar, daily calendar, weekly and monthly. And again, it's just that idea of if we're present here in the now, how far can we chunk time or think into the future? How far can we think into the past? And so some kids, some people may never move beyond the now, the present. And so the kids who are in the now, who may move beyond the now or are going to be here, they need a way to talk about that. And so this first one that I want to talk to you about is an anticipation calendar timepiece. So this is conceptually the first type of calendar that we would use. What's happening now? It's for our students who can't plan much into the future or be reminiscing much into the past. The kids are now, things are close to the body. And you can see the picture here. So this anticipation calendar, you want two containers that are different from each other. And you can see here, I'm getting some really weird messages, you guys. Am I still here?
Yes, you're still with us.
Okay, just told me that I'd lost Zoom again. Okay, well, cross your fingers. Hopefully we've got it. I'm not sure where I went out on everything, but we were talking about anticipation calendars. And this is a picture of one here. Is there any questions about that or anything? Throw that out there again. Let me pull up the chat. Everybody good? Just completely makes sense. All righty. You know, picture's worth 1,000 words, right? So I'm going to play you another video and
If there is a
hopefully,
question about it, they want to know, do you put one thing in the box at once? So I'm thinking
yes.
she means one at a time.
Yes, Laura, that's a good question. Thank you for that. So, yes, you're going to put the object or picture or whatever literacy medium the student uses in that now basket, and you go do it. You take it. We're going to go. You put a toothbrush in there. Say, um, brush teeth. You ready? Let's go. You go brush the teeth. Take that object over there and do your toothbrushing thing, and then as you bring it back to your anticipation calendar, your daily timepiece, you put it in the finished basket. So you've got those two baskets. And then you put your next item that you're going to go do. Maybe you're going to go eat lunch. Maybe it's a spoon. Put the spoon in that now basket and you go eat. And that's kind of how that works. It's for the right now moment.
And before you play this video, are you able to kind of give some description about the individuals that are in it and maybe some of the objects that they're using?
Yes,
If
absolutely.
we have someone that is visually impaired or has low vision, just to get the detail, or just for us anyway, just to kind of break it down.
I'll do my best.
Okay.
So this is going to be a video of Natasha. She was a little girl who was in my classroom. Um, Natasha is a very now kind of girl. She was very curious and she would love to look all over the room, check things out. She had cortical visual impairment. She is 6 years old in this video. She was born everything just fine, and at 3 years old, she started to have um, seizures, had to have neurosurgery. Um, and we really suspected, I don't know if testing was ever done, but we suspected that aside from the cortical visual impairment, that there was an auditory processing issue as well. So a cortical hearing, um, something going on. That was never proven. That was just a question I had, I guess. So We're going to see, with Natasha, we're going to see Tish again, who we just saw with Jarvis. Tish is also, or was Natasha's speech pathologist. You're going to see Natasha with her anticipation calendar. So she is going to go, first thing you'll see is Tish and Natasha at the anticipation calendar, and they're going to do a foot bath. So you'll see them get the object, which is a pitcher representing foot bath, out of the now basket, take it over to the area of the classroom that they do the foot bath, do that activity. And in there, you're going to see a sequence box. So remember, you've got your daily timepiece, anticipation calendar, come over to the activity. We're task analyzing it. That's where we've got our sequence box. And then notice there's not a lot of there's not a lot of talking or anything in this video. It's hard to hear. It's not really great that way, but I've thought about not using it for that reason, but then I thought, you know what? That's actually, I think, hopefully that's even better because it kind of makes us focus visually on what's happening. And so notice how Tish is doing a lot of offering. If there are any Lily Nielsen disciples on today in active learning, so one of the first things you do is offer. So she's offering that pouring. You'll see the very experiential aspect to this, like they're really doing a foot bath. Natasha loved water. She loved to play with water. She loved vibrating things. So that was how we sort of thought this whole foot bath thing up. It wasn't that Natasha needed a foot bath, her feet didn't ache that I know of or anything. Um, but so we used foot bath as a vehicle for communication and language and that sequencing and stuff like that. So hopefully that gives you some background on things. And I'm not going to play this whole deal here. So there's her calendar area. You can see with the CVI, things are very bright colors. She liked yellow. She liked blue. Notice the eccentric viewing. So she's not really, okay, I touch it. Now I see it. And you saw that picture that was in the basket. That was the now basket. So they're just moving about 3 feet away. This was just off frame from her calendar. And they come over here to where they have this foot bath set up, and you can see in the background, there's her anticipation calendar, and there are 3 or 4 slots in it, and you see the yellow finished basket. You can see how Tish is offering. She's not saying a word. It's all tactile, bodily, and visual. So finished basket, there's step 1, put it in the finished basket. What's next in that sequence over there? They're going to grab the towel. It doesn't show this, but they go through all of these. Then the last thing is lotion. Always need some nice smelly lotion on your feet after a good foot bath, So the thing that bothers me now when I watch this, just as an insider into my brain, is the amount of auditory clutter that's happening in the background here. You can hear me monkeying with somebody back there. You can hear music playing. And so we really focus on this idea of visual clutter, but what about the auditory clutter? It's just as important. And you can see how Tish is also really pairing that tactile bodily and the movement with the vision to help that brain connection. So again, there's the last step in the sequence box, the lotion. Put it in the finished basket. Activity's done. And then gonna double down on finishing that, okay? We're gonna take it in here to the sink and finish it, dump the water in there too. Now I'm gonna stop it here. But any more questions? Let's see. Okay, Donna's got a very nice little summation in the chat. Okay, so it looks like we've had some questions. I think we've gotten all those. But so Natasha is a very now kind of girl. Like I was saying, her concept of time, she's not at this point in her life able to really think real far into the future or think real far into the past, but it's really just starting with what's happening now and adding that language to it, both static and dynamic. Her static language, her literacy is objects. And all the stuff that I guess it was me and my team thought of when we were designing that calendar was, how far can Natasha chunk time from the now into the past and future? What accommodations does she need? So she's CVI, so we tried to design that calendar to be very textural. You'll see a picture of her calendar. Just actually, why don't I just do this? Whoops. That's her calendar. So she really loved that round. So the now basket is that colander, and it's like a metal kind of screen. It's very textured, and she really loved to kind of feel that. Versus the yellow finished basket, which was plastic, different shape. So again, blue and yellow were favorite colors. She was very attracted to both of those colors. Different from white. So all those kinds of things that we were thinking of as we designed her calendar. She was not a little girl who was going to sit down at a chair and, have a big discussion at calendar. So it was like, let's get it and go kind of thing. So again, we've kind of talked about this, but primary bold colors, reduce visual clutter. I wanted it just below her eye level too. Talked about the metal and the plastic, all these kinds of things. How are we going to design this for our student? Okay, we're going to move to the daily timepiece that represents what will happen further out sequencing into the day, further out into the past. So, or back into the past. So this is another daily timepiece calendar that you see here. And you see at the top is a weekly calendar, actually. And the blue flaps are the days that are in the past. And so it's Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, so on. And then the upcoming ones are still visible. So you're going to take that weekly thing down, put it on today's Thursday, and then this student's using pictures. And you can see how the thing that's happening now, this person that we're going to go do something with, has that kind of almost like a picture frame looking around it. So instead of those items maybe moving through a sequence box, they're using like that picture frame. It's very visual kind of deal rather than a sequence box or lines drawn on there. So again, this calendar is an expansion on anticipation, and it's just going to require expanding the now into the future and into the past, bigger chunks of time. the day as a bigger concept. Some of the prerequisites that we want to think about when we're looking at what time frame to use. So we want our student to be able to start recognizing some consistent people, locations. Tish knows that when she gets that, or Natasha knows that when she got that water pitcher, that she would go over to this section of the room where it was foot bath. And she wasn't really doing that yet, but that would be one of the first things that we look for. A student can follow a left to right sequence without much support. We want to see recognition of start to see recognition of familiar symbols. So that literacy, are they showing, recognition of a person symbol or a spoon for eat or anything like that? You can see in this calendar that I have a picture here. This student has their weekly calendar, and that's on that sort of slanted piece there in the middle of the picture, kind of. The two red flaps again are for days that are past, so that's probably Sunday, Monday. And then they have tactile symbols. These are the days that are coming up of the week. And then the one that's laying flat on the table is the daily calendar. And so this student is obviously using tactile symbols. They're starting to put some braille on it. I don't know if you can see that, but there's some braille labels on these tactile symbols. So it's just introducing, it's almost like an awareness. And then these are the different activities throughout the day. So that whole day, that big chunk of time is being broken down into different segments. It's almost like a task analysis of the day. And then the finished box is that blue box at the end. So as each activity, you go and do it, you come back to the calendar, put it in the finished box, and then you get the next thing and go do it. At the end of the day, then you can review the day. You can reminisce about what happened by looking through the finished box, sort of looking at what passed. Another thing to point out here is that you've got who, where, and where broken down on the back. So you can see the red is the where symbols. So they're starting to build sentences here. Go where, with who, and do what. So people, places, actions.
Hey, Chris,
Yeah.
this is Jen. I had a question about that former picture. I don't know if you know if that student happens to be, if the student was deafblind or if they had a strong foundation of language. Because we sometimes know with a lot of our deafblind kids that there are a lot of abstract symbols on there. And sometimes that's a challenge for some of our deafblind students that have limited language foundation. So I was just curious if you knew the level of that child that was using that advanced system.
I do. And so this student is deafblind, and they started out with object symbols. So really moving from less abstraction to more abstraction, right? And also with objects, they tend to be larger. So you saw the big picture of water. With Natasha, well, a tactile symbol or a picture or a word, it's more abstract, but it also tends to be more portable. So this student started with object symbols, and as they got more familiar with, more fluent with the object symbols, the team would introduce tactile symbols. So you could get Velcro, and I'm just going to use the picture of water thing as an example. Velcro a tactile symbol to it, kind of the way they're moving here into greater abstraction from a tactile symbol to Braille. They're not going to expect the student to read the Braille right now, like, okay, let's sit and look at this tactile symbol and read these Brailles, tell me what this word is. But it's an awareness level at this point, and eventually this student will progress or go further into that abstraction of the written language of using Braille. And they'll transition out of tactile symbols. Again, Braille being way more, even more abstract and smaller, more portable. So I hope that answers that question. Do you need a follow-up, Jen, or did that get it for you?
Nope, that was good, thanks.
Okay. Okay, here's another daily/weekly calendar. So it's just another variation on a theme. So you can see in the back here is the weekly calendar, and this student's an object level student. So their literacy is least abstract, real objects, right? And then there is a daily calendar, the blue one, the blue sequence box in the front. So for each day of the week, they've got a different like big activity that they're going to do. And, you know, usually my things that I would put on my weekly calendar would be things unique to that day, obviously, but things that are like more of a big deal, right? If we're going to go off campus one day or something like that, then I would put that for Wednesday. And then you're breaking that day down again into smaller chunks. There's a finished basket, the white thing. You can see this student has their goals on the wall up there too. So any questions about that, just shoot. Tabitha, would you recommend having the calendar set up in a daily format or used as a first then format? And Tabitha, that's a good question, and not to dodge your question, but it depends on the student, and it depends on their ability to conceptualize time. So if you're talking about something that's happening at the end of the day, are they able to understand that, or are they more present and they need to talk about the now? And I'm going to point you to this book again. I'm not trying to sell this book or anything. I don't make any money. But there is a time frame evaluation in here. It's called time frame evaluation, and it kind of walks you through a process to help determine where a kiddo is at conceptually with that sort of how am I able to think about conceptualized time further from the present. Hopefully that kind of answers your question. Would you also have an example of a calendar with a motion like when one is being mobile? Yeah, absolutely. So looking back to the Jarvis video when he went to the drum store, so you guys saw his really elaborate daily calendar in the classroom, right? But when he went out to explore, they were going to the drum store and the restaurant and stuff, you saw that portable calendar that was in book form. So turn the page and there were like 3 or 4 symbols, I forget, on each page. So that was a more portable version of what he had in the classroom. And I can tell you also with Jarvis, like when he was my student, he didn't have that idea of flipping a book yet. So we would take a strip. I just called it like his traveling calendar. And he had a pretty darned elaborate daily calendar in the classroom. But hey, if we're going to go to music or gym or some other pullout or something, we need to be able to talk about what's happening in that chunk of time. We need to break it down further. So we would put those items on a smaller strip. And Jarvis carried a backpack pretty much everywhere he went when we were going around campus or something. And we'd clip it on his backpack. And whenever we needed to talk, whenever Jarvis needed verification or just wanted clarification, we'd unclip that little strip and we could talk about it. So yeah, it's always good to be thinking portability. You know, if it's an object kid, like I can tell you the kiddo here, see the black bag that's hanging on the wall there next to the cane? Put those objects in there. So if we're traveling somewhere, we can pull these things out and talk about it. It's a really good question. Okay, here's yet another example. So you can see this student's using a combination of written words, drawings, pictures, and they have a 2-week calendar. So that's 2 weeks in like standing up. And again, like the big deal that's going to happen for that day of the week. And we're talk about vocabulary. So we're talking about Monday, Wednesday, Tuesday, those kinds of words here, right? The student's able to expand time further into the future and further into the past. And then the daily calendar is the one that's flat on the desk. And you can see, I mentioned expansion strips earlier. You can see expansion strips here of eat lunch in the cafeteria with, I don't know who that person is, but you're go where, do what, with who. You're building sentences, expanding. And those run, if the calendar is running left to right, those run up and down to kind of delineate that. Let's see. On these calendars, do you ever consider identification, for example, in a social setting if they get separated from the caregiver and need to bail themselves out? That's a good question, and I have not ever considered that. It's you know, usually was DEFCON 5 if one of my students got lost because they didn't they might have had the language to tell somebody who they were, but not often would the person on the receiving end have the receiving language to understand that. So that's a very complex question though. But thank you for asking that. Okay, so how much time do we have here? Okay, man, we're running low. I'm gonna just play you a tiny tidbit of this. This is student Tanya. Tanya is congenitally deafblind. She's about 15 years old here. She has a very complex calendar. She has no vision. She had CIs implanted when she was about 3 years old. And then she wouldn't wear them for years and years. So she had no hearing either. She just started to reintegrate those about the time of this video. But you're going to see her and her teacher, Pamela, talking. And they're at their daily calendar. I'm just going to try to cue this up and just play like a minute of it here, if I can do this.
3 weeks in the future.
So there's her monthly calendar. She's 3 weeks into the future, really expending time.
So happy. So happy.
And so this whole video, if I played the whole thing, is about 40 minutes long. And it was very important for Pamela and Tanya to have this discussion every day.
Monday.
This is how they started their day, every day. And I apologize, I lost track of time. I need a better calendar. But I want to jump ahead. So that's her daily, and they're going to load that up. And they're going to use this book. So this book is divided up into people, places, things.
Dun, 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 dun.
You can see all the multitudes of tactile symbols. Tanya is really, I mean, she's just a super genius. She's really an amazing, amazing kid.
Gonna go to the baseball game. Dun, dun. You got it, good job. Yeah.
So what you would see is they would load her whole day, and Tanya would go through the book, find what she's doing in that sequence for the day. I just want to show you really quick. Here's a weekly calendar again. We've really talked about this, so I'm going to jump forward. Monthly calendar, we talked about that. You saw this is Jarvis's monthly. But I want to show you this timeline calendar really quick. So how do we really expand time? So this calendar stretches over 100 years, and it goes all the way down a hallway. This teacher did this. Hopefully you get some sense of how far this goes. But you can see the whole class is here. and it shows when kids were born, when certain things in history, when inventions you see, when people were born, presidents. So again, it can be a really beautiful tactile as well as visual, if students have vision, way of talking about time. And this one's talking about the past, obviously, but can be a very, very rich conversation. And you can see the multiple formats. So it's tactile symbols, braille, some written language, just amazing kind of thing. There's another more isolated picture of it. So here's what happened in 1930. With that, if say the radio was invented, I'm pulling this out, I don't know when the radio was invented, but something was invented in 1930. You know, maybe you go on a field trip with the class to kind of show how that thing is made, you know, like how do we learn how some things are made, you know, if we can't visually kind of see it and learn about it, we have to go experience it. So, you know, that's a good way to kind of do that and put it in the context of mom was born then, grandma was born then, I was born, you know, kinds of stuff too. Okay, so I'm going to stop there, I think. And I wonder if there are any questions before we have to end. Okay.
There is a
Donna,
link
thank
to
you
the
for considering.
evaluation. There is a link to the evaluation in the chat box, and we are also going to send it by email. Please, please, please consider filling it out. It's just a few questions, but it really helps us plan for future training webinars and other face-to-face events. So
And-
we would also like to thank our interpreters for today. Go ahead, Chris, you want to say something?
Well, thank you, interpreters, for sure. Thank you, Donna and Jen and Sherry and everybody for all of your help and for having me. I hope this was useful. And I did want to also say that we're sending out a resource list too with some links and stuff like that. So.
And thank you all for participating in the three-part series. We know that your time is valuable, so we try to get you the information, you know, effectively. And in these areas where we think you can just kind of log on, get some great information and resources, and get back with us again in the future when we have future webinars. Be on the lookout for our e-newsletter that comes out sometimes weekly, sometimes bi-weekly, depending on what trainings are happening. And if there's any questions or concerns, or if you may think that there is a child in your classroom that has vision and hearing challenges, feel free to reach out. We can talk it through. And we have a website and a Facebook page as well. Yes, we will be sending out the link to the recordings. You should have already gotten the link to the part 1 and part 2. And we will send out part 3 with a resource list as well.
Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, thanks again.
See you next time.
Yes.